Welcome to the Mixed Methods in Research. Part 3 video. Now we are going to understand other two basic mixed methods types. Types of mixed methods. 2. Explanatory sequential mixed methods design. 1. Design. The explanatory sequential mixed methods approach is a design in mixed methods that appeals to individuals with a strong quantitative background or from fields relatively new to qualitative approaches. It involves a two-phase data collection project in which the researcher collects quantitative data in the first phase, analyzes the results, and then uses the results to plan, or build onto, the second, qualitative phase. The quantitative results typically inform the types of participants to be purposefully selected for the qualitative phase and the types of questions that will be asked of the participants. The overall intent of this design is to have the qualitative data help explain in more detail the initial quantitative results, thus, it is important to tie together or to connect the quantitative results to the qualitative data collection. A typical procedure might involve collecting survey data in the first phase, analyzing the data, and then following up with qualitative interviews to help explain confusing, contradictory, or unusual survey responses. 2. Data collection. The data collection proceeds in two distinct phases with rigorous quantitative sampling in the first phase and with purposeful sampling in the second, qualitative phase. One challenge in this strategy is to plan adequately what quantitative results to follow up on and what participants to gather qualitative data from in the second phase. The key idea is that the qualitative data collection builds directly on the quantitative results. The quantitative results that then are built on may be extreme or outlier cases, significant predictors, significant results relating variables, insignificant results, or even demographics. For example, when using demographics, the researcher could find in the initial quantitative phase that individuals in different socioeconomic levels respond differently to the dependent variables. Thus, the follow-up qualitatively may group respondents to the quantitative phase into different categories and conduct qualitative data collection with individuals representing each of the categories. Another challenge is whether the qualitative sample should be individuals that are in the initial quantitative sample. The answer to this question should be that they are the same individuals, because the intent of the design is to follow up the quantitative results and explore the results in more depth. The idea of explaining the mechanism how the variables interact in more depth through the qualitative follow-up is a key strength of this design. 3. Data analysis and integration. The quantitative and the qualitative databases are analyzed separately in this approach. Then the researcher combines the two databases by the form of integration called connecting the quantitative results to the qualitative data collection. This is the point of integration in an explanatory sequential design. Thus, the quantitative results are then used to plan the qualitative follow-up. One important area is that the quantitative results cannot only inform the sampling procedure but it can also point toward the types of qualitative questions to ask participants in the second phase. These questions, like all good qualitative research questions, are general and open-ended. Because analysis proceeds independently for each phase, this design is useful for student research and perhaps easier to accomplish than the convergent design, because one database explains the other and the data collection can be spaced out over time. 4. Interpretation. The mixed methods researcher interprets the follow-up results in a discussion section of the study. This interpretation follows the form of first reporting the quantitative, first phase results and then the qualitative, second phase results. However, this design then employs a third form of interpretation, how the qualitative findings help to explain the quantitative results. A common misstep at this point by beginning researchers is to merge the two databases. While this approach may be helpful, the intent of the design is to have the qualitative data help to provide more depth, more insight into the quantitative results. Accordingly, in the interpretation section, after the researcher presents the general quantitative and then qualitative results, a discussion should follow that specifies how the qualitative results help to expand or explain the quantitative results. Because the qualitative database questions narrows the scope of the quantitative questions, a direct comparison of the overall results of the two databases is not recommended. 5. Validity. As with all mixed methods studies, the researcher needs to establish the validity of the scores from the quantitative measures and to discuss the validity of the qualitative findings. In the explanatory sequential mixed methods approach, additional validity concerns arise. The accuracy of the overall findings may be compromised because the researcher does not consider and weigh all of the options for following up on the quantitative results. We recommend that researchers consider all options for identifying results to follow up on before settling on one approach. Attention may focus only on personal demographics and overlook important explanations that need further understanding. The researcher may also contribute to invalidated results by drawing on different samples for each phase of the study. If explaining the quantitative results in more depth, then it makes sense to select the qualitative sample from individuals who participated in the quantitative sample. This maximizes the importance of one phase explaining the other. These are a few of the challenges that need to be built into the planning process for a good explanatory sequential mixed methods study. 3. Exploratory sequential mixed methods design. 1. Description of the design. If we reverse the explanatory sequential approach and start with a qualitative phase first followed by a quantitative phase, we have an exploratory sequential approach. A three-phase exploratory sequential mixed methods is a design in which the researcher first begins by exploring with qualitative data and analysis, then builds a feature to be tested, e.g., a new survey instrument, experimental procedures, a website, or new variables, and tests this feature in a quantitative third phase. Like the explanatory sequential approach, the second feature builds on the results of the initial database. The intent of this design is to explore with a sample first so that a later quantitative phase can be tailored to meet the needs of the individuals being studied. Sometimes this quantitative feature will include developing a contextually sensitive measurement instrument and then testing it with a sample. Other times it may involve developing new variables not available in the literature or attuned to a specific population being studied, or designing a website or an internet application shaped to the needs of the individuals being studied. This design is popular in global health research when, for example, investigators need to understand a community or population before administering English language instruments. In this design, the researcher would first collect focus group data, analyze the results, develop an instrument, or other quantitative feature such as a website for testing, and then administer it to a sample of a population. In this case, there may not be adequate instruments to measure the concepts with the sample the investigator wishes to study. In effect, the researcher employs a three-phase procedure with the first phase is exploratory, the second is instrument, or quantitative feature, development, and the third is administering and testing the instrument feature to a sample of a population. 2. Data collection. In this strategy, the data collection would occur at 2 points in the design, the initial qualitative data collection and the test of the quantitative feature in the third phase of the project. The challenge is how to use the information from the initial qualitative phase to build or identify the quantitative feature in the second phase. This is the integration point in an exploratory sequential design. Several options exist, and we will use the approach of developing a culturally sensitive instrument as an illustration. The qualitative data analysis can be used to develop an instrument with good psychometric properties, i.e., validity, reliability. The qualitative data analysis will yield quotes, codes, and themes, see Chapter 9. The development of an instrument can proceed by using the quotes to write items for an instrument, the codes to develop variables that group the items, and themes that group the codes into scales. This is a useful procedure for moving from qualitative data analysis to scale development, the quantitative feature developed in the second phase. Scale development also needs to follow good procedures for instrument design, and the steps for this include ideas such as item discrimination, construct validity, and reliability estimates, see Develis, 2012. Developing a good psychometric instrument that fits the sample and population under study is not the only use of this design. A researcher can analyze the qualitative data to develop new variables that may not be present in the literature, to identify the types of scales that might exist in current instruments or to form categories of information that will be explored further in a quantitative phase. The question arises if the sample for the qualitative phase is the same for the quantitative phase. This cannot be, because the qualitative sample is typically much smaller than a quantitative sample needed to generalize from a sample to a population. Sometimes mixed methods researchers will use entirely different samples for the qualitative first phase, and quantitative components third phase, of the study. However, a good procedure is to draw both samples from the same population but make sure that the individuals for both samples are not the same. To have individuals help develop an instrument and then to survey them in the quantitative phase would introduce confounding factors into the study. 3. Data analysis and integration. In this strategy, the researcher analyzes the two databases separately and uses the findings from the initial exploratory database to build into a feature that can be analyzed quantitatively. So integration in this design involves using the qualitative findings, or results, to inform the design of a quantitative phase of the research such as the development of a measurement instrument or new variables. This means that the researcher needs to pay careful attention to the qualitative data analysis steps and determine what findings to build on. If, for example, the researcher uses grounded theory The theoretical model generated may provide a model to be tested in the second, quantitative phase. A qualitative case study can yield different cases that become the focus of important variables in the second quantitative phase. 4. Interpretation. The order of interpretation is to first report the qualitative findings, the development or design of the feature to be tested, e.g., the development of an instrument, the development of new quantitative measures, and then the quantitative test in the final phase of the study. It does not make sense to compare the two databases, because they are typically drawn from different samples, as noted above in the data collection discussion, and the intent of the strategy is to determine if the qualitative themes in the first phase can be generalized to a larger sample. 5. Validity. Researchers using this strategy need to check for the validity of the qualitative data as well as the validity of the quantitative scores. Special validity concerns arise, however, in using this design that need to be anticipated by the proposal or mixed methods report developer. One concern is that the researcher may not use appropriate steps to develop a good psychometric instrument. Developing a good instrument is not easy, and adequate steps need to be put in place. Another concern is that a researcher may develop an instrument or measures that do not take advantage of the richness of the qualitative findings. This occurs when the qualitative data lacks rigor or occurs simply at the theme level without the further data analysis steps associated with using one of the qualitative design types, such as ethnography, grounded theory, or case study procedures. Finally, as previously mentioned, the sample in the qualitative phase should not be included in the quantitative phase as this will introduce undue duplication of responses. It is best to have the sample of qualitative participants provide information for scale, instrument, or variable, or website design, but the same individuals should not complete the follow-up instruments. This sample strategy, therefore, differs from the sampling strategy needed for an explanatory sequential design. Upcoming days, we will be looking at the advanced mode of application of mixed methods in research. Stay connected, let us promote research and make better and advanced India. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe, like and comment your doubts and suggestions. Don't forget to share the video to your friends and tell them to subscribe for more videos on research.